The air in my living room, a room I had poured my very soul into, suddenly felt thin, impossible to breathe. My husband's words hung in that air, heavy and sharp, like shards of glass. You have 48 hours to get your things and get out. Have you ever looked at the person you promised your life to and seen a complete, terrifying stranger in that moment? The man I loved was gone. He wasn't just kicking me out of our home, he was methodically erasing me. And the reason why is so calculated, so deeply twisted. You will not see it coming. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If you have ever been betrayed, used, or made to feel worthless by the very people who were supposed to protect you, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. This isn't just my story, it's our story. This channel is a place where we take our power back. Your subscription is a vote of confidence that our voices matter and we will not be silenced. And please, comment "I am with you" below, so I know I'm not just screaming into the void. Knowing you're out there, it means everything. Okay, let me take a breath. To understand how we got to that soul-crushing moment, you need to see what I saw just 5 minutes earlier. It was a perfect Portland afternoon, the kind where the sun cuts through the lingering gray of the morning and makes everything feel clean and full of promise. I was standing in the living room, running my hand over the century-old Douglas fir mantelpiece I'd spent a month restoring. I could still smell the faint, clean scent of lemon oil and beeswax. Every inch of this house was a testament to my love and my labor. When Kevin and I first bought this place, it was a wreck of forgotten, dilapidated craftsman home that everyone else saw as a teardown. But I saw its bones. I saw its soul. I was an architectural restorer by trade. But this house? This was personal. This was my heart, rendered in wood and plaster and light. I'd just finished brewing a pot of Stumptown coffee when the doorbell chimed. I smiled, thinking Kevin was home early. But when I opened the door, the smile froze on my face. It was Kevin, but he wasn't alone. His mother, Eleanor, stood beside him, ramrod straight, her handbag clutched in front of her like a shield. She had a look of predatory stillness I knew all too well. Kevin wouldn't meet my eyes. He just shuffled past me into the foyer, his gaze fixed on the floorboards I had painstakingly refinished by hand. Eleanor wanted to stop by. He mumbled, his voice strained. "Sophia, dear," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that was more poisonous than any venom. She glided into the living room, her eyes scanning every detail the built-in bookshelves I'd designed, the period-appropriate light fixtures I'd sourced from a salvage yard, the vibrant rug that tied the room together. She wasn't admiring it. She was assessing it, claiming it. "You've done a lovely job taking care of my house." The words hung there, confusing and sharp. My house. I forced a laugh, trying to brush it off as one of her usual passive-aggressive jabs. "Our house? You mean, Eleanor? It's been a lot of work, but it was worth it." "Oh, I'm sure it was," she said, turning to face me. Her smile was gone, replaced by a cold, triumphant smirk. She walked over to the oak coffee table, a piece I had built with my own 2 hands, and placed a thick manila folder on its surface. The sound it made was unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. But the arrangement is over now. I looked at Kevin, my heart starting to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Kevin? What is she talking about? What arrangement? He finally looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw nothing. No love, no remorse, just a hollowed-out emptiness. That's when he said it. The words that would detonate my entire world. "You have 48 hours to pack your things. Mom is moving in." My brain simply refused to process it. It was like he was speaking a foreign language. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing on the street, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, it all became a deafening roar. "What, Kevin? This is a joke." "Right. A sick. twisted joke." Eleanor stepped forward, tapping the folder with a perfectly manicured finger. "It's no joke. This folder contains the legal paperwork, the original, authentic deed to this property, in my name and my name only. You've been a guest here. Sophia. A long-term one, I'll admit. But your stay is over. A guest. In the home I had bled and sweat for. In the home where I had poured my entire inheritance, the legacy from my grandmother, to save it from ruin. The sheer audacity, the cruelty of it, stole the air from my lungs. My husband gave me 48 hours to leave our home, and he had brought his mother to deliver the eviction notice. I stared at the folder on the table, this supposed real deed that was meant to erase 5 years of my life, my work, my love. It was a declaration of war. I looked from Eleanor's smug face to Kevin's pathetic, cowardly one, and in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. It turned to steel. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I would cry and beg and pack my little bags and disappear. They had no idea who they were dealing with. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was just the man who had set a timer on the end of my world. That cold, hard feeling in my chest, that steel I mentioned. It didn't come from nowhere. It was forged over 5 years, forged in the fires of 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000,000 moments of being dismissed, and the slow, agonizing realization that I was building my dream home with a man who was already living in someone else's shadow. My mind reeled back, away from the horror of the living room, searching for the beginning. How did that hopeful, smiling woman from 5 years ago become this stranger in her own home, facing eviction? It all started with a dream and a smell. 5 years ago, Kevin and I were crammed into a soulless, cookie-cutter apartment in the Pearl District, paying an obscene amount of rent for gray walls and zero character. We were dreaming of a place with history, a place with a soul. I spent my weekends driving through the older neighborhoods of Portland, the ones with sprawling oak trees and houses that had seen generations come and go. And then I found it, tucked away on a quiet street in Laurelhurst. There it was, a 1912 Craftsman, forgotten and sad, its porch sagging like a weary sigh. A foreclosure sign was half buried in the overgrown lawn. To anyone else, it was a teardown. The realtor practically begged us not to go inside, but the moment I stepped across the threshold, I could smell it. Underneath the decades of dust and neglect, there was the faint, sweet scent of old-growth wood. It smelled like history. It smelled like potential. It's a disaster. Soph, Kevin said, kicking at a loose floorboard. He was already on the phone with his mother. I could hear her tinny voice squawking through the receiver. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. It has bones. Kev, I whispered, my fingers tracing the outline of a beautiful, built-in cabinet hidden under layers of hideous yellow paint. It just needs someone to love it back to life. When Eleanor came to see it herself a few days later, she didn't even try to hide her disgust. She stood in the entryway, clutching her designer purse, looking as if she'd just stepped in something vile. "Kevin, darling," she'd said, her voice loud enough for me to hear from the other room. "Are you sure about this? It has the distinct aroma of poor decisions and black mold. I should have listened to that warning. Not about the house, but about her. But I was blinded by love and by my vision. I laid out the blueprints on our tiny apartment floor, showing Kevin how we could open up the kitchen, how the original hardwood floors were probably still intact under the disgusting linoleum, how the attic could become a stunning master suite with skylights. He seemed excited then, caught up in my passion. We scraped together every penny we had for the down payment, and against Eleanor's very vocal objections, we bought the money pit. It was ours. Or so I thought. The first few months were magical. We'd spend our weekends covered in dust and paint, laughing as we demolished the ugly 1970s kitchen cabinets. It felt like we weren't just building a home. We were building a life, a future. I was in my element. This was more than a job for me. It was a calling. I treated every piece of wood, every original fixture, with a reverence that Kevin found amusing. "It's just a house," he'd say. "No," I'd reply, carefully stripping a century of paint from an ornate door hinge. "It's a story." The cracks began to show subtly at first. Eleanor would call Kevin every single night. After those calls, his enthusiasm for the project would wane. I'd be excitedly explaining my plan to restore the original sash windows, a difficult but rewarding process. He'd nod distractedly, scrolling on his phone. "Yeah, that's cool. Stuff. Or, we could just get vinyl replacements like Mom suggested. It'd be faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper." That became Eleanor's mantra, whispered into her son's ear from miles away. She had no appreciation for history, for craftsmanship. She saw my passion not as a gift, but as a flaw, an inefficient, sentimental waste of time and money. And slowly, her voice started to become his. One Saturday, I was on a ladder, painstakingly restoring the crown molding in the dining room. It was intricate, detailed work. Kevin was supposed to be helping, but he was on the porch, on another long call with his mother. When he came back inside, his face was tight. "Mom thinks we're focusing on the wrong things," he announced, not looking at me. "She said we should be focused on resale value, neutral colors, laminate flooring, what buyers want." I nearly dropped my scraper. I climbed down the ladder, my hands trembling slightly. "Kevin, this isn't for buyers. This is for us. This is our home. The home we're going to live in, maybe raise a family in. Why does your mother get a vote in how we build our life?" He flinched, and for the first time, I saw the flicker of weakness in his eyes that would later become a gaping void. "She's just trying to help. Sophia, she's practical. She doesn't want to see us get in over our heads. Is that what she said, or is that what you think I asked?" My voice quiet. He didn't have an answer. He just turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the half-finished dining room, the silence screaming with everything that wasn't being said. I looked around at the exposed lath, the drop cloths, the cans of paint. The magic was starting to fade. I realized I wasn't just fighting against decades of neglect on these walls. I was fighting a war on a second front, against an invisible enemy who was slowly poisoning my husband's mind against me, against our dream. And the man who was supposed to be my partner, my biggest supporter, was letting the enemy walk right through the front door. The chill I felt in that moment had nothing to do with the lack of insulation. It was the cold, lonely premonition of the battle to come. That cold premonition I felt. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a promise. A promise of the storm that was about to break over our heads. For the next year, the house became a battlefield of passive aggression. Every design choice I made was met with Eleanor thinks, from Kevin. Our dream home was slowly being redesigned by a committee of 3, and I was the only one who wasn't allowed to vote. But the real crisis, the moment that sealed our fate, wasn't about the color of the walls or the type of faucet in the bathroom. It was about what lay beneath. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in November. I was in the basement, planning for some built-in storage, when I noticed a fine, reddish-brown dust along a support beam. My blood ran cold. I knew what it was. I grabbed a screwdriver and poked at the wood. It crumbled like a dry cookie. Termites. And not just a few, a full-blown, catastrophic infestation that had been silently eating away at the bones of our home for years. The inspection report was brutal. The damage was extensive, reaching into the main floor joists. The foundation on the north side also had significant cracking that the initial inspector had somehow missed. The contractor we brought in didn't mince words. "You're looking at about $150,000 to fix this," he said, his face grim. "And it's not optional. This house is not structurally sound. You're lucky it's still standing." $150,000. It was an impossible number. We were already stretched thin, living paycheck to paycheck to cover the mortgage and the ongoing renovation costs. The air went out of the room. I watched Kevin's face pale, the color draining from it until he looked like a ghost. This was it. This was the end of the line. The house, my beautiful, broken house, was going to be condemned. We were going to lose everything. Our only hope was the bank. We spent a week putting together a proposal for a home equity line of credit, a second mortgage, anything. I remember sitting in the loan officer's sterile, gray office, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. I laid out my architectural plans, the projected increase in the home's value, my business records. The loan officer, a man named Mr. Davies with cold, indifferent eyes, just nodded along, typing into his computer. He finally stopped, took off his glasses, and looked at us. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone devoid of any actual sorrow. "But the bank cannot extend any further credit to you at this time." I was floored. But why our payments have always been on time. The value of the property has already increased significantly because of my work. He cleared his throat, his eyes flicking towards Kevin for a split second. "The issue, Ms. Reyes, isn't the property. It's your husband's debt-to-income ratio and his past credit history, a significant loss from a failed tech startup investment a few years back." I turned to Kevin. His face was frozen. A tech startup. He'd told me he'd lost a little money on some stocks. He never said it was a failed company. He never said it was significant. I felt a hot, dizzying wave of nausea wash over me. How much else had he lied about whose idea was that investment I didn't even have to ask? I knew. It had Eleanor's fingerprints all over it. We walked out of the bank in complete silence. The rain was coming down harder now, cold and miserable. We sat in the car, the only sound the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the windshield wipers. We were ruined. It was over. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on me, and I thought about my grandmother. She had passed away 2 years before we bought the house, leaving me everything she had. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a comfortable sum. Her last words to me about it were, "Sophia, this is for your dream. Whatever it may be, don't let anyone tell you what to do with it. Build something beautiful." I had kept that money in a separate investment account, untouched. It was sacred. It was my safety net, my independence. It was my grandmother's belief in me, converted into currency. Using it felt like a betrayal of her final wish. But as I lay there, I could practically hear the termites chewing through the beams below us. I thought of the sagging porch, the beautiful wood moldings, the way the morning light streamed through the dining room windows. My dream wasn't an abstract concept anymore. It had a physical address. It was this house, and it was dying. The next morning, I found Kevin at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I sat down across from him, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest. "I'm going to use my grandmother's inheritance," I said, my voice barely a whisper. His head shot up. A flicker of something I couldn't decipher crossed his face, before being replaced by a look of performative concern. "Soph, no, you can't. That's your money. We can't ask you to do that." But he wasn't really protesting. There was no fight in his voice. There was just relief. A gut-wrenching, unmistakable wave of relief. He wasn't my partner, sharing the burden. He was a drowning man, and I had just thrown him the only life raft. He didn't have to fight. He didn't have to sacrifice. I would do it for him. For us. It's the only way, I said, my voice flat. I'll call the bank tomorrow and arrange the transfer. The work on the house started 2 weeks later. It was loud, invasive, and expensive. But it was working. The house was being saved. A week into the repairs, Eleanor stopped by, unannounced, as she often did. She walked around, inspecting the new support beams and the foundation work. Her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. I was explaining the process to her, the pride in my voice mixed with the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. She listened silently, then turned to me, a cool, assessing look in her eyes. Well, she said, her voice like chipping ice. It's good to see your grandmother's money is finally being put to good use. An investment in my son's future is always a wise one. And there it was. Not a thank you. Not an acknowledgement of the monumental sacrifice I had just made. In her eyes, I hadn't saved our home. I had simply paid my dues. I had paid the entry fee to be a part of her son's life. The inheritance wasn't my grandmother's legacy anymore. It was just an investment in Kevin. I stood there, covered in sawdust, my hands raw from work, and I felt a piece of my heart turn to stone. I had saved the house, but I was beginning to realize that in the process, I might have just lost myself. The joy was gone. All that was left was the grim, heavy weight of my investment and the echoing silence of a home that was starting to feel less like a dream and more like a cage. That feeling of being caged, of my love and sacrifice being twisted into a mere transaction. It festered inside me for the next 3 years. I threw myself into finishing the house, working with a grim determination because my grandmother's legacy was sunk into its very foundations, and I refused to let that be for nothing. The joy was gone, replaced by a quiet, simmering resentment that sat like a stone in my stomach. Kevin and I drifted into a state of polite coexistence. We were roommates who shared a bed, but the emotional chasm between us grew wider with every passing day, and that cold, heavy feeling, it was nothing compared to the fresh hell that was unfolding in my living room right now. My mind snapped back to the present, to Eleanor's triumphant smirk, to Kevin's hollowed-out eyes, to the manila folder sitting on the table, a silent testament to a betrayal so profound I still couldn't fully grasp it. The ringing in my ears subsided, replaced by a hot, furious buzzing. The shock was wearing off, and in its place, something else was rising. Rage, pure, undiluted rage. I finally found my voice, and it was a stranger's, low and shaking, a guest. Is that what I am to you, Kevin? A guest in the home I rebuilt from the studs up. He had the audacity to look pained, as if he were the victim here. Soph, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder. The word came out as a choked laugh. You want to talk about hard? Let's talk about hard. Kevin, let's talk about the nights I spent on my hands and knees, pulling up staples from this very floor while you were out with your friends. Let's talk about learning how to plaster because we couldn't afford to hire someone. And let's talk about my grandmother's inheritance, the $150,000 I poured into this house to save it from collapsing. Did you forget about that? Or was that just part of my rent? He flinched, the words hitting their mark. But Eleanor stepped in, smooth and venomous. That was a choice you made, Sophia, a financial decision. No one forced you. You were protecting your investment. My investment. I spun to face her, my fists clenched at my sides. It was our future, our life. Everything I did was for us. There is no us anymore, Kevin finally shouted, his voice cracking. And there it was, the truth, ugly and raw. This isn't working. Sophia, it hasn't been working for a long time. "So this is your solution," I gestured wildly around the beautiful room, my voice rising with every word. "To throw me out with 48 hours notice. To have your mother deliver my eviction notice after everything I've done, after everything I gave up. This was my moment to see what was left of the man I married. A moment for him to show a shred of decency, of remorse. Instead, he delivered the final, fatal blow." He straightened up, and a chilling sort of calm settled over him. It was the calm of a decision long since made. "It's not like that. Soph," he said, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. "You're being emotional. This was always Mom's house, legally. It was just a formality, putting it in her name when we bought it, for tax purposes. We always knew that. The understanding was that it would be ours someday, but things have changed. We always knew that." The words sliced through my anger, straight to my heart, and just like that, the last 5 years of my life rearranged themselves into a new, hideous picture. It wasn't a partnership. It wasn't a marriage. It was a long con. Every time he'd said, "Mom thinks," every time he'd dismissed my work, every time he'd let her chip away at my confidence, it wasn't just weakness. It was complicity. He knew, from the very beginning, that my name was on nothing. He knew he held all the power. He had watched me pour my inheritance, my soul, into a property that I had no legal claim to. He hadn't just allowed it to happen. He had depended on it. His relief that day, when I told him I'd use my grandmother's money, it wasn't just relief that the house was saved. It was the relief of a gambler whose mark just willingly pushed their last chips into the pot. I felt something inside me go cold and quiet. It was the sound of love dying, not with a bang, not with a shatter, but with a quiet, final click, like a lock sliding firmly into place. The woman who loved this man, who had made excuses for him, who had hoped he would one day stand up for her, for them, she was gone. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger, a weak, entitled man-child who had hidden behind his mother his entire life, letting her fight his battles, letting her do his dirty work. He wasn't my husband. He wasn't even a man. He was just Eleanor's son. My voice, when I finally spoke, was devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a surgeon announcing a time of death. "Get out," I said. Kevin looked startled. "What get out of my house?" I repeated, my gaze unwavering. Eleanor scoffed. "I think you're confused. Dear, this is my house. You're the one who is leaving." I held up a hand, silencing her. I didn't look at her. My eyes were locked on Kevin. "Your 48 hours started the moment you walked through that door. The clock is ticking. Now get out. Both of you." There was something in my voice, in my eyes, that they had never seen before. The desperation was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was that cold, hard steel. For the first time, Kevin looked afraid of me. He mumbled something, grabbed his mother's arm, and practically pulled her out of the living room. I stood there, listening to their footsteps retreat, to the sound of the front door opening and closing, and then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. I was alone, in a house that was no longer a home. I was no longer his wife. I was an obstacle, an investment that had reached its maturity and was now, finally, being liquidated. For a long time after they left, I didn't move. I just stood in the center of the living room, in the deafening silence, while the beautiful afternoon light I loved so much began to fade, casting long, lonely shadows across the floor. The steel in my veins felt like it was turning back into ice water. The rage had been a fire, hot and cleansing, but now, as the adrenaline drained away, the cold, crushing reality of my situation began to settle in. 48 hours, 2 days to dismantle a life. Where do you even begin? I walked through the house like a ghost, my hand trailing along the walls. I saw everything through a new, horrifying lens. The kitchen, with its stunning soapstone countertops that I had saved for a year to buy, was no longer the heart of our home. It was just a high-end renovation I'd paid for in Eleanor's property. The cozy reading nook I'd built into the bay window, my favorite spot in the world, was just a charming feature for the next occupant. Every nail I had hammered, every floorboard I had sanded, every tile I had laid, it wasn't an act of love. It was unpaid labor. I went upstairs and pulled a dusty cardboard box from the top of the closet. The word memories was scrawled on the side in my own handwriting from a lifetime ago. I knelt on the floor and began to pack, my movements mechanical and numb. A framed photo of Kevin and me on our wedding day, smiling and impossibly young. I placed it face down in the box. A silly souvenir from our first vacation together. In it went. My hands moved, but my mind was a million miles away, lost in a fog of grief and disbelief. This is what it felt like to be erased. You had to pack your own life into a box and carry it out the door, making way for your replacement. I was no longer a wife. I was a tenant whose lease had expired. I moved to my office, the small room I had converted from a forgotten spare bedroom. I needed to find the title to my car, my own bank statements, the documents that proved I existed as a separate entity from this house, from him. I pulled out a large, heavy file box from the bottom of the closet labeled House Docs. The irony was a bitter pill. I sat on the floor and opened it, the scent of old paper and ink rising to meet me. It was an autopsy of our shared dream, the original inspection report, receipts for lumber, warranties for appliances, architectural drawings, a whole life, documented and filed away. I sifted through the folders numbly, my mind a blur, and then I saw it. A thick, 3-ring binder with a label maker tag renovation loan, Pacific Crest Bank. My fingers froze. A memory, sharp and sudden, pierced through the fog. I was back in that cold, gray bank office. Mr. Davies, the loan officer, was speaking. His voice was a flat monotone, but I could hear one sentence as clearly as if he were sitting next to me, and given that the property's title is technically held within a family trust under her name, we will need Mrs. Eleanor Vance to co-sign on this loan as a party of interest. At the time, it had been just another bureaucratic hurdle, an annoying piece of paperwork in a mountain of annoying paperwork. Eleanor had made a big show of how inconvenient it was, sighing as she signed the documents, acting as if she were doing us a massive favor. But now, my heart started to hammer against my ribs. A frantic, wild energy surged through me. My hands were shaking as I ripped the binder open, flipping through page after page of dense legal jargon that I'd never truly bothered to read. Disclosures, amortization schedules, terms and conditions, and then I found it. The final signature page, there was my signature, neat and hopeful. There was Kevin's, a confident scrawl, and right below them, unmistakable and arrogant in its looping cursive, was hers, Eleanor Vance. I stared at her signature, and the world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to slow down. She hadn't just been aware of the loan, she hadn't just approved of it. She had legally bound herself to it. She had signed a legal document acknowledging a $150,000 lien against her property, a debt incurred for the express purpose of funding my renovations. She couldn't claim ignorance. She couldn't pretend this was some surprise. Her own signature testified against her. She knew, down to the very last dollar, what I had poured into this house. This wasn't just a moral argument anymore. This was leverage. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just caught the scent of its prey. The numbness vanished, replaced by a jolt of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. My hands were still trembling, but now with excitement, not despair, I fumbled for my phone, my fingers flying as I took a clear, crisp photo of the signature page. I sent it to the one person I knew would understand. My best friend since college. Chloe. She wasn't just my friend. She was a bulldog of a divorce attorney who had a particular hatred for men who tried to screw over their wives. My phone rang less than a minute later. Sophia. Chloe's voice was sharp, electric. Don't you dare pack another box. Don't you move a single thing. Where are you right now? I'm in my office. In the house. Good. Stay there, she commanded. I'm looking at this picture. Do you have any idea what this is? I think so, I said, my own voice shaky but strong. I think it's my way out. Honey, no. Chloe laughed, a fierce, triumphant sound. This isn't your way out. This is your way in. This document proves her complicity. She legally acknowledged your massive financial contribution to the property. She can't just kick you out. She's a party to the debt. Oh, they are in so much trouble. Now tell me about this real deed she brought with her. Did you get a look at it? No, it's in a folder on the coffee table. Okay, first thing tomorrow morning, I'm sending a courier. We're going to have that document examined by a forensic specialist. I've seen this before. These things are often rushed, fraudulently notarized. People get sloppy when they think they're winning. She paused, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her brilliant legal mind. Sophia, you magnificent woman. They didn't just give you a weapon. They handed you the entire arsenal. I hung up the phone, my entire body buzzing. The grief was gone. The despair was gone. The 48-hour deadline hanging over my head was no longer a ticking time bomb. It was a starting pistol. I walked out of my office and back into the living room. I looked at the single, sad cardboard box on the floor. Then, slowly, methodically, I knelt down. I picked up the wedding photo and placed it back on the mantelpiece. I took out the souvenir and set it back on the shelf. I unpacked every last item until the box was empty. I wasn't leaving. I sat down at the beautiful oak dining room table that I had restored. I placed the open loan binder in front of me. I took out a pen and a fresh legal pad. The war was on, and I was finally ready to write the terms of their surrender. The next 47 hours were the strangest of my life. The clock wasn't a threat anymore. It was a countdown, a deadline. But it wasn't my deadline. It was theirs. I didn't pack another thing. Instead, I prepared. I spent hours on the phone with Chloe, going over every detail. I gathered every receipt, every bank statement, every email that documented the 5-year-long project that had consumed my life. The house, which had been a place of dread and sorrow just a day before, transformed into a command center, a war room. My grief was still there, a cold, heavy stone in my gut. But it was now surrounded by a wall of cold, hard purpose. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my life, for my grandmother's legacy, for the woman I had been before they tried to break me. By the time the final hour arrived, I was ready. I was sitting at the dining room table, the one I had stripped and stained until the oak grain shone like honey. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. In front of me, I had a cup of tea, a copy of the loan agreement, and Chloe's preliminary report on the deed. Chloe herself sat to my right, calm and composed, her files laid out in a neat, intimidating stack. She looked like a queen holding court, and I felt a surge of strength just being near her. We didn't speak. We just waited. Right on time. The sound of a car door slamming broke the silence. Footsteps on the porch. Then, a key in the lock. The front door swung open. Eleanor entered first, a look of smug expectation on her face. She was dressed in a crisp, cream-colored pantsuit, looking every bit the conquering matriarch. Kevin trailed behind her, his shoulders slumped, his eyes already darting around, looking for boxes, for signs of my surrender. When they saw me, sitting there so calmly, with Chloe beside me, they both stopped short. The confident smirk on Eleanor's face faltered for a fraction of a second. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, her voice sharp. "I see you haven't made much progress. Don't tell me you need an extension on your deadline." Chloe smiled, a thin, dangerous smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There will be no need for an extension. Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice even and professional. "Sophia won't be going anywhere. Please, have a seat. We have a few things to discuss." They hesitated, a flicker of confusion passing between them. Reluctantly, they sat down on the opposite side of the table. It felt like a negotiation, but they didn't realize they had come to the table with no cards left to play. Chloe slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a copy of the signature page from the renovation loan. "Do you recognize your signature?" Mrs. Vance Eleanor glanced at it. "Of course. I had to sign some bank forms for them. Kevin was having some financial trouble." She said it with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if it were a trivial matter. "You did more than that," Chloe continued, her voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "By co-signing that document, for a loan of $150,000, you legally acknowledged and bound yourself to the significant financial investment my client was making in this property. You became a party to the debt incurred specifically for the renovations. In the eyes of the law, that's called complicity. It means you cannot now claim that Sophia was merely a guest or that her contributions were a gift. You legally consented to her becoming a major financial stakeholder in this property, a stakeholder who now needs to be bought out." Eleanor's face, for the first time, lost its composure. The smugness was replaced by a flash of genuine confusion. Then anger? "That's absurd. That money was an investment in my son. The loan was tied to the property, not to your son." Chloe corrected her coolly. "But that's actually the least of your legal problems today." She slid a second, thicker document across the table. It was the forensic report. "This is a bit more serious. We had the deed you presented to my client examined by a specialist, and it appears you've been a bit sloppy." Chloe leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential, lethal tone. "The notary stamp, for instance, is a known forgery. We contacted the notary public listed. She has no record of this document and has affirmed under oath that she was, in fact, on a cruise in the Bahamas on the date of the supposed signing. Furthermore, the signature itself shows stylistic inconsistencies with other legal documents you've signed. In short, Mrs. Vance, this deed is fraudulent, and presenting a fraudulent legal document in an attempt to seize property isn't just a civil matter, it's a felony. It comes with significant jail time." The color drained from Eleanor's face. She looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, I saw her completely and utterly speechless. I watched Kevin. His eyes darted from the report to his mother's horrified face, and then, finally, to me. And in that moment, I saw it all. The shock, the confusion, and the dawning, sickening realization that his mother hadn't just betrayed me. She had used him. She had lied to him, too. He was a pawn in her vindictive game, and he was about to be swept off the board right along with her. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was the terror of a child who has just realized the person they trust most in the world is a monster. Eleanor started to bluster, her voice high and shrill. "This is ridiculous. A scare tactic, you can't prove anything." That's when I finally spoke. My voice was calm and clear, cutting through her panic like a knife. I didn't look at her. My eyes were locked on the pathetic, broken man who was still legally my husband. "It's over. Kevin," I said. "The games are done." I stood up, feeling a sense of power I had never known before. You have two options. Option 1, you and your mother will buy me out. Not for what I put in. You will pay me 50% of the current, appraised market value of this house, a value that my work created. You will also reimburse me for all legal fees. You have 30 days to secure a loan. I paused, letting the weight of that impossible number sink in. Option 2, I continued, my voice dropping. I decline your buyout. Instead, Chloe files a motion to force the sale of the property, where it will be sold to the highest bidder. After the bank is paid, we will split the remaining profit according to the court's judgment of our respective contributions. And while that civil suit is pending, we will present this forensic report to the district attorney and press felony charges against your mother for fraud. In that scenario, you both walk away with nothing but legal bills and a criminal record. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. This is not a negotiation. You will give me your decision in the next 24 hours. Now, get out of my house. They were broken. Eleanor looked 10 years older, her mask of superiority shattered, revealing the panicked, petty woman underneath. Kevin just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, as if seeing me for the very first time. He didn't say a word. He just stood up, helped his trembling mother out of her chair, and they walked out of the house, not with a bang, but with the shuffling, defeated exit of a beaten army. The door clicked shut, and the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was filled with the sweet, clean air of victory. I had won. It wasn't a happy victory. It was a brutal, heartbreaking one. But it was mine. The phone call came less than an hour after they left. It was Kevin. His voice was a broken, unrecognizable thing. He was crying. He said he was sorry, that he didn't know, that his mother had manipulated him, that he loved me. It was a pathetic, desperate litany of excuses from a man who had just realized his life raft was sinking right along with his mother's. I listened, my face a blank mask, feeling nothing. No anger, no pity, just a vast, empty distance. When he was finished, I said only one thing. Have your lawyer call my lawyer, Kevin. Then I hung up. They couldn't get the loan. Of course. No bank would touch them. So, it was option 2. The house went on the market. In the booming Portland real estate scene, my beautiful, perfectly restored Craftsman was a gem. It sold in a week, for well over the asking price, to a young family who looked at it with the same wide, hopeful eyes I'd had 5 years earlier. I saw the woman run her hand over the mantelpiece, and for a moment, I felt a pang of loss. Not for the house, but for the hopeful woman I used to be. The day the sale closed was the last day I ever set foot in that house. I did one final walkthrough after the movers had taken my things. The rooms were empty, echoing and hollow, but it didn't feel sad. It felt clean. I had poured my soul into its walls, and in the end, it had paid me back, giving me the capital I needed to start over. It was never truly my home, but it was the crucible that forged the woman I was becoming. I closed the front door, didn't look back, and drove away. As for Kevin and Eleanor, Chloe was a shark. We didn't press criminal charges. I didn't want a long, ugly public fight. I just wanted it to be over, in exchange for avoiding a fraud indictment. Eleanor signed over a significant portion of her share of the profits from the sale to cover my legal fees and damages. They were left with a fraction of what they had tried to steal. Their relationship in ruins and their reputations in our old neighborhood destroyed. I heard they moved to a small condo across town. I don't know. I don't care. They are a chapter of my life that is now closed, locked, and gathering dust on a shelf. That was 6 months ago. I'm telling you this story from a different place now. A place that's all mine. It's a bright, airy design studio in the heart of the city, instead of old, dark wood. It's all glass and white walls and polished concrete floors. Light pours in from massive industrial windows, and the air smells like fresh coffee and possibility. On the frosted glass of the front door, in clean, bold letters, it says, Sophia Reyes Design. My name, not his, mine. The settlement from the house gave me the freedom I'd never had. I didn't just buy a new apartment. I invested in myself. I started my own firm, focusing on sustainable, historic restoration, the work I was born to do. I'm busier than I've ever been, and for the first time, the work feels joyful again. It's not a sacrifice. It's a passion. It's funny. For years, I thought my life's work was restoring that old house. I was obsessed with fixing its broken foundation, healing its wounds, making it strong and whole. I realize now that the house was just a metaphor for my marriage. I was pouring everything I had into something that was structurally unsound from the very beginning. I was trying to fix a foundation that was rotten to the core, and I learned the most important lesson an architect or a woman can ever learn sometimes. You can't save a broken foundation. Sometimes, the only thing you can do is walk away, tear it all down, and build something new, something better, on a piece of ground that is entirely your own. Thank you for being here with me, for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but sharing it takes away the power the darkness once held. My story has found its ending, but I know that so many of you watching right now might be in the middle of your own story, your own battle. If you believe in the power of starting over, in the strength it takes to build a new life from the ashes, please take a second to hit that like button. It lets me know that these stories matter. And in the comments below, I don't want you to just tell me what you thought. I want you to tell me one small thing you are going to do this week to invest in yourself. It can be anything: a coffee, a walk in the park, starting that project you've been putting off. Let's fill the comments with acts of self-worth. And finally, if you haven't already, I'm asking you to please subscribe. This isn't just a channel for drama stories. This is your weekly dose of strength. It's a reminder that you are not alone, that you are the architect of your own life, and that your happy ending is always, always worth fighting for. Join our community, and let's build something beautiful together.